What is up, everybody? Hopefully, everybody is doing just fantastic this morning. Just waiting for everybody to get in here. I'm just going to retweet my live stream and do my thing, and then we'll get started. All right. Hopefully, everybody is doing fantastic today. Let's see. Oh yeah, Raul with the what is the over under for the microphone failing? The microphone doesn't usually fail, but it might. I think we should suspend all betting though until I can actually get my computer fixed, and then the betting will be more interesting. Right now, it's just kind of a almost a for sure thing. All right, got my live stream retweeted. Hopefully, everybody's doing good. All right, let's go ahead and get started here. Hopefully everybody is doing just fantastic today. Welcome, Zaganel. Hello, everybody. Bubbles, welcome in. The usuals. I love my regulars in here. Hopefully everybody's doing good today. We got a lot to cover. We have some U.S. Domestic politics stuff to go over. We have a lot of Ukraine updates to cover. So I'm glad the news is starting to come in a little bit quicker now. All right. Everybody ready? We will start with the good old map updates. Hello in California. Let's see. All right. So we got the good old map here today. I'm going to just get rid of myself so you guys can see a little bit better. Actually, I'll put myself in the corner like this so you can see me down there. Denmark, Croatia, what is up? When will the war end? I've always said 2026, guys. 2026 is when everything will wrap up. That's my prediction, at least. All right. Let's go into, let's start at the north this time. Let's go right here next to Berestove, where the Russians have just made a slight advance right on the border of the Kharkov and Luhansk oblasts. Again, more progress in this area. Everything on this side of the Zhibiets River down here. Remember, this is the salient that is becoming very, very difficult for the Ukrainians. And the same thing is beginning to happen on this part of the Oskol River. The amount of area that the Ukrainians have to operate on this side of the Oskol is becoming less and less. And as that happens, Russian artillery and aviation advantage becomes much, much more effective. And just the fact that the Ukrainians are losing territory up here, while the Russians aren't making very serious, concerted offensive operations in this area, just shows how the manpower issues that are plaguing the Ukrainian armed forces are now starting to show just everywhere across the map, not just in the areas where the Russians are pushing. So if you guys remember, a couple of live streams ago, I talked about how there were a few brigades removed from the Kupiansk area, brought down to the New York Toretsk and Pokrovsk front to try to stabilize the situation down here. As that happens, expect more of this in the Kharkov area. Ukraine's biggest issue is they just do not have enough manpower right now to hold this entire front line. It's just too much. All right. Moving down to the Seversk salient right here. Seversk is the major town in this area. The Russian forces have advanced out of Rozdilivka along the railway tracks. This is kind of how they're advancing along this entire salient, along the railway lines. And have entered the southernmost buildings of Perizny right here. So, again, progress in an area where Russians have not seen much progress since the fall of Soledar. All right. Everybody doing good? All right. Before we continue with this, I actually forgot. If you guys want to find more of my work, you can go into the description of the YouTube video right now and find my Telegram and my Twitter. You can find constant free updates there. All my content is free, guys. If you want extra content, you can go over to my Patreon, and that is where I really appreciate all of the support you guys give me. All of my content over there is free as well, but if you support me on my Patreon, you will get access to some of the combat footage videos that I put out. It's a demonetized series that I do about 2 weeks early. The next episode will be coming out right after this. I already have it recorded. I just have to get it uploaded onto Patreon, which takes forever for some reason. But I will get that out immediately after this, and you guys can go check that out. And then number 8 will become free. So go do that. The easiest way that you guys can support me as well, if you're watching on YouTube right now, is just by clicking that subscribe button and liking the video. I really appreciate it. All right. Sorry, I forgot to do that. I'm the worst self-marketer when it comes to like self-promotion and stuff like that. I hate it. Here in the New York Toretsk front, the Russians have advanced again in Zalizny. They have pushed in and captured the school here, this large school building. Again, not the advance alone is not anything, in and of itself is not particularly threatening. However, if you look at the overall situation in this area of the front, remember that this is the last remaining 8-year fortification from 2016 time period. So very strong fortifications here. The Russians have already bypassed a majority of them and are now almost to the main road here that connects New York to Toretsk. Once the Russians make it onto this road, and as well over here in New York, make it up into Nelepivka and onto the road right here, this entire pocket should collapse and the Ukrainians will be forced to retreat. They actually have kind of a difficult situation because the center of their rear here, the Ukrainian line here, the center of the defense is a bunch of reservoirs, which is going to make retreat much more difficult in terms of the amount of space that they have. You can see that this is the distance that they have basically to get out on this side. And then over here, they have a equally small distance to get out. So as the Russians continue to push in through these urban settlements, the ability for the Ukrainians to withdraw out of here is going to become more and more difficult. And I would expect that we will see this salient fall rather soon. I actually made a post about this on Twitter. I want to take us over to my Twitter right now just to actually talk about the post because I have a map that I want to show you guys. Right here. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. So as I pointed out, the Russians are working their way up onto this road here. Once this road is cut, supply and logistics into this fortification area will be very, very difficult for the Ukrainians. They will be forced to retreat or be surrounded and cut off. And then once that pocket is closed, you can really start to see how the salient will look much more threatening for the Ukrainians. The Russians will be approaching Toretsk from multiple angles, and Toretsk will likely be very, very difficult for the Ukrainians to hold, considering that it's slightly isolated from like Konstantinivka. Chasiv Yar and Bakhmut were right up against each other. New York and Toretsk are a little bit separate. So it's going to be interesting to see how this develops. It appears as though the Ukrainians don't have the ability to even hold New York and Toretsk without the flanking maneuver. I made a prediction a while ago, and I'll go over this, and I still think that it could come to pass. However, with the Russian progress inside of New York and Toretsk, I don't even know if the flanks, remember I put this up, that the Russians were going to really try to push up these flanks, get the Ukrainians to commit into New York and Toretsk, and then create another meat grinder operation for this salient. I don't know if that's even going to happen now. The Russians seem to be having much more success in their offensive operations inside of New York and Toretsk compared to on the flanks. And there doesn't even seem to be much of a concerted push outside of Klishchivka and south of Ivanivsky across the canal here in any sort of meaningful way. So I think that the Russians are just going to continue fighting up through New York because the Ukrainians are not able to hold it. So, if it's not broke, don't change it, don't fix it. Again, if the Ukrainians are somehow able to get enough manpower into this area to halt the Russian advances, then I believe that we may see here. We may see something like this in the near future, where the flanks are pushed up on by the Russians, and then the salient becomes another Bakhmut meat grinder, with Konstantinivka being the sort of Chasiv Yar of Toretsk. Toretsk being Bakhmut. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm sorry I'm not reading much chat. Remember, guys, if you want questions answered, go ahead and throw them up in chat. I look over every now and then. If you donate through Super Chat, your question will absolutely get put up on the screen. I just go back and forth, and I don't have my chat up 24/7, so I don't know. I'm not always looking at it. What's up from Slovakia? How are you doing, man? That's awesome. Butler, PA, Canada, Arizona. Man, I love it. I love that you guys are from everywhere. St. Louis, Missouri, everywhere. That's awesome. All right. Moving down here to the southern end of New York. The Russians are just expanding the flanks of this penetration that we saw into New York. It is unlikely that the Ukrainians will be able to do anything about this now. If you remember, the immediate penetration was done through a tunnel, which is funny. Again, another tunneling operation that caught the Ukrainians off guard, set this entire front back probably a couple weeks in terms of the Russian progress. And now the Russians are expanding the flanks of this, and it's just going to get worse and worse for the Ukrainians from here. So yeah, this salient is turning out much different than I thought it was going to go, as is war, but still very interesting how the Russians are getting it done. Okay, moving over to the Pokrovsk front, or Chitny is now pretty much in the rear from anywhere. From this side, it's not too far. It's 3 miles. But from over here, we're looking at 5 miles, which is 8-9 kilometers. So we're getting pretty far away from the front line now. This is now a staging area, or Chitny is now a good staging area on the high ground. And as we can see here, so this is not so much, I wouldn't say Russian advances. This is more of a Russian advance here towards Branivka. But these two advances right here are more or less just the gray zone in between this Russian advance and this Russian advance, and this Russian advance and this Russian advance sort of filling in. It'll be the same when this field gets captured. As soon as the Russians make it into this tree line, the field, which is gray zone, will be counted as captured. So that's basically what's happening here. Just two gray zones that are now under Russian control. All right, moving down here to Novoselivka, Persia. We do have confirmation of a Russian advance. This is actually over several days, several different advances, I do believe. I just had not updated my map in this area, but now the Russians have pushed up, and this bridgehead is now much, much, much smaller. Again, I talk about most of this, something like this right here, basically being gray zone, right? This is all gray zone. There's probably not a lot of Ukrainian positions being held in here. The Ukrainians are just maintaining the bridgehead so they don't give up the entire crossing. All right. Moving down here to the Pabyeta area, a Russian advance. Again, sort of a gray area here where there's not a lot of Ukrainian presence. The Russians have just moved up along the tree line and now control more of this territory. As I said, this is where we're now starting to get very close to the go time here for the southern Donetsk direction. I've talked about it since about April. I think that this is the area where the Russians are really going to commit a lot of reserves during the summer offensive. I'd be interested to see how that plays out. And one of my conditions was this pocket closing. So Pabyeta south to Konstantinivka, once this 0532 has been captured and the Russians are moving along it, that's when you will likely see a more concerted effort to capture Ugledar and Vadyana down here to the south. Again, the Russians are progressing towards Konstantinivka. Konstantinivka, yeah. And once they begin to put pressure here, as well as this advance that I'm going to talk about down here in a second, the 0532 is already likely not being used for logistics, but once the Russians gain access to it and can start using it themselves, that's when things are going to get very, very difficult for the Ukrainians down here. The Ukrainians are fighting tooth and nail right now to keep the Russians off of this highway. This highway access is actually, this highway access is actually very, very bad news for Ukraine if Russia is able to capture it fully. It will mean that they will be able to run logistics from Donetsk south all the way on road access to Mariupol and not have to go back over this way so far. So it provides closer logistics for the Russians to push out. Roads are vitally important here because of the amount of space. I mean, if you're an American, you'll understand that 10 miles in between roads makes things very difficult when you're talking about transportation in between those fields. I mean, walking through fields and transporting logistics through fields like this is just not fun. So roads like here, where you see all of the urban settlements built along them, are very, very important in this region. And the 0532 is a major, major one that the Russians have for a long time wanted to capture. You can see that the progress has already been made from Marinka down to Pabyeta, and now Pabyeta to Konstantinivka. Once that's captured, I imagine this entire little bridgehead on this side of the 0532 for the Ukrainians is going to collapse. All right, moving down to this advance. So this advance is slightly deceiving compared to what the actual thoughts on the Huktanivka front. I was like, what the fuck? I don't even know what that is. All right. So this advance is a little deceiving here. More realistically, the Russians are probably closer to the 0532. We saw a video of basically a single or two Ukrainian or Russian IFVs making a push down this road like this right here. Let's actually change this color just so you guys can see it for now. I made a push down this sort of dirt path here along this tree line and came very, very close to the 0532. They disembarked here. A few of the troops were injured by an artillery shell that ended up hitting the IFV, but it does show that the Russians are in this area and they are making rather large advancements compared to where the front line is. And what I believe that this shows is that there are some major gaps in Ukraine's defense, especially in this southern direction. And I think that the Russians are about to exploit that. You can see how once the Russians reach the 0532 and begin to put pressure on the coal mine, Ugledar will be in an encirclement. And once that happens, a Russian offensive from the south should begin. I think that this summer is going to prove very, very difficult for the Ukrainian garrisons, both in Vadyane, the coal mine #1, and in Ugledar. So again, I've talked for a long time that the southern Donetsk direction is ripe for an offensive, and I believe that we could see one very, 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 very soon, considering that, at least in my unprofessional opinion, all of the markers are here for the Russians to go on the offensive. They've reached what I would consider their goal, their short-term objective, which is the 0532, and have cut supply to Ugledar. Ugledar now does not have a paved road logistics line. FPVs can cover all logistics coming in and out of Ugledar from this side now, as well as artillery can be almost entirely trained on this area. The Ukrainians will still hold this with all of their will, but it's beginning to look much, much worse compared to, like, say, a year and a half ago when the Russians went on the offensive here and they lost a lot of vehicles in this area to the minefields. The situation is looking much worse for the Ukrainians now than at that time. So I do believe we will see something rather large here. And once Ugledar falls, I think that the Ukrainians are going to have a much, much more difficult time holding this entire southern Donetsk line. Again, I told you, watch all the progress towards Pokrovsk and watch southern Donetsk. This is going to be the area, guys, where you're going to see a lot of potential progress over the summer and into the beginning of fall while the ground is still solid, at least. Okay. I think that is all of the map updates. All right. If you guys were over by October realistic, probably not, man. Probably not. A collapse can happen at any time, but as of right now, it seems like the Ukrainians at least have enough ammunition, equipment, and manpower to fight and retreat for a while. Kalibrated, do you know any project that tracks Ukrainian casualties like a reverse Metazona? I can never find anything on Ukrainian casualties. Nope, and good luck finding anything. Casualties, trying to count casualties on either side is a fool's errand to begin with. But no, I do not know of any good sources. Ukrainians don't really count their losses particularly well. So, I mean, even if you got a rational, realistic number, you wouldn't be able to know if it was true or not anyway. If I actually have a post about this that I can talk about, because I just threw it up. So this is from Rob Lee on Twitter, a pro-Ukrainian account. Here, we will do this. All right. This is just talking about Bakhmut. However, Bakhmut was a highly unfavorable position to defend. I don't really know how they can say that when they talked about, I mean, they for so long they talked about how Bakhmut was the fortress city. This is where the war turned for Ukraine. They made it so important. It was on the low ground, but the Russians were also fighting on the low ground when the Ukrainians had the high ground in Chasiv Yar. They maintained strong logistics. So I don't really understand that. It was an unfavorable position to defend once the Russians broke through Soledar and broke through Kleshchivka and had the flanks compromised and were sporting a artillery advantage for sure. Situated on the low ground, Russian gains around Bakhmut meant that by February, the AFRF had established artillery control over the main ground lines of communication into the city, along which Ukrainian troops were rotated. At this point, the disparity in losses became unfavorable for Ukraine, was probably unfavorable the entire time, but we'll let them cope. Overall, approximately 10,000 Ukrainian troops were killed or severely wounded during the fighting for and around Bakhmut. Thus, the city was allowed to acquire a strategic, symbolic significance that defined the operational military operational military logic. Okay, so the Battle of Bakhmut lasted from, I want to say, November of 2022 until May of 2023. It was the epicenter of the most fighting. We saw dozens of Ukrainian brigades get rotated in and out of the area over the extent of the battle. I'm calling complete bullshit on 10,000 casualties. That is ridiculous. The Russians and Wagner alone in this fighting observed, I want to say, I can't remember the specific number. It was either 12,000 or 19,000 casualties, a majority of which were penal battalions and 2,500 of which were combat, professional mercenaries. So, yeah, no, I'm calling complete bullshit on this. That's ridiculous. I watched the Ukrainians getting slaughtered on that road of life for about 3 months straight. Artillery shells, vehicles getting destroyed. It was a horrific battle, incredibly bloody. 10,000 in terms of, if they said 10,000 KIA and then 20,000 wounded in action, severely wounded in action, maybe that's might be more realistic. But 10,000 total casualties for the entire Battle of Bakhmut. There's literally nothing to be said about this. That is absolutely ridiculous. However, outside of the cope, the takeaways from this are Ukraine lost the Battle of Bakhmut. The position was not militarily sound. They should not have defended it. They chose to defend it based off of political reasons. And that led to catastrophic failures in the counteroffensive. Things that I had been saying for 2 years almost now are being referenced like they were, they were supposed to happen. And exactly right here, 19,547 Wagner fighters were killed in Bakhmut. So I was right, 19,000. A 4-to-1 exchange ratio in favor for Ukraine. Snore, dude. You don't have an artillery advantage. You don't have a drone advantage. And yet, somehow still, you're inflicting more casualties on the Russians, and and the Ukrainians themselves are only taking 10,000 casualties over the course of an 8-month battle, which saw tens of thousands of casualties on the Russian side for sure. It's just a complete joke, man. This is just a farce. Again, they're going to do this. They are going to do this for every single loss until the war ends. I just hope you guys know. Mariupol, they did the same thing. Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, Soledar, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, the counteroffensive. It's lies, and then a year later, somebody comes out and says, "Well, actually, we kind of got shit kicked," and everybody goes, "Yeah, well, we all knew, but we just pretended because." The illusion of success is much more fun than the reality of failure. It's childlike thinking, man. And I can't believe that people like Rob Lee, who sit here and cover the war consistently, don't look at that 10,000 Ukrainian troop casualty number. I know he's just reporting it. It's just a quote. But hey, throw your 2 cents in there and say there's absolutely no way only 10,000 Ukrainians were killed and wounded in the entire extent of the Battle of Bakhmut. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. It's just such a ridiculous position. The reason why my comment on this was actually funny, I thought, I said, and 30,000 missing, right? That was my addition to this, because we actually saw something funny, and I saw somebody, I have articles that I want to talk about. I think I saw somebody ask something about the Krynky operation. Is it still going on? Stuff like that. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. I have some articles to talk about. But I thought that this was funny because the reason why I said in 30,000 missing was because we just got this report, which is also, I'm going to talk about this. According to a Ukrainian media site, at least 262 Ukrainian soldiers were killed and 788 are missing in the Krynky area. The ratio is the same one that will be, and then I said this is the ratio. This ratio is the same one that will be given for Ukrainian casualties after the war as well. We only suffered 20,000, 30,000 casualties, but there are 200,000 people missing. So, oops. But this just goes along with exactly what I said, right? This is the Ukrainian way of counting casualties. We know that 262 soldiers were killed because the bodies were probably brought back. 788 are still missing. And these are likely only the casualties that actually happened across the river, the guys that you saw getting killed in boats and stuff like that. Again, I think these numbers are an incredible lowball for propaganda purposes, whatever. They were crossing that river for over a year. I think the Krynky operation has been going on for over a year. And you're telling me only 262 people have been killed in that time and that amount of fighting? It's bullshit. More than 262 Russians have been killed on that side of the river in that amount of time? Absolutely. The amount of FPV hits we've seen over there, the amount of Lancet hits we've seen, and this is only on the opposite side of the river. I guarantee you the casualties across the river from glide bomb strikes and missile strikes is monumentally higher than this. So, I mean, this is just, again, a lot of cope, but the fact that they admit that 788 are missing, giving a 3-to-1 MIA to KIA ratio, really just kind of goes to show you what the Ukrainian casualty counting is looking like. So, yeah, that's not good. just admitting that you have 788 missing individuals when you count your total casualties as 268 is, or 262 is, you almost can't put words to it. It's very interesting. I wonder where they're missing. Were they captured? All right. So I just wanted to talk about that because I'm going to go over and talk about these two articles that were recently posted. And I just thought that it was kind of funny. So we have this one from the New York Times. Ukraine loses hard-won positions near Dnipro River in the south. Soldiers and military analysts said an operation to establish a foothold on the river's Russian-controlled eastern bank was bloody and hard to justify. Apparently not that bloody. There's no blood actually when people go missing. So it wasn't that bloody. But yeah, so hard to justify for sure because it didn't make any sense. But I'll read a little bit of this for you guys. A Ukrainian soldier with an anti-aircraft cannon in the Kherson region last month. Ukrainian troops have lost a hard-won position on the eastern bank of the Dnipro River near the southern city of Kherson after over a year of bloody fighting to hold on to a piece of land in what some Ukrainian soldiers and military analysts have described as a futile operation. Hey, I called it a futile operation before it started. I called the Krynky operation. I knew it was coming too. As soon as that dam got blown, I knew exactly. As soon as I read Russian positions getting washed away, I knew what was going to happen. I knew that they were going to try to cross. I knew that it was going to be in line with the Zaporozhye offensive. It makes sense. I would have done an Ugledar operation at the exact same time as well. It's not a bad way to go about things. But after the Zaporozhye offensive failed and they got caught in their political bullshit, this should have ended, but they couldn't do it. So they just sacrificed Marine Brigade basically in the Krynky area for absolutely no good reason. Ukrainian military said on Wednesday night that fighting continued on the eastern bank, but that most of the main positions in the village of Krynky, where its troops had gained a foothold, were destroyed by intense, combined, and prolonged enemy fire. Yeah, almost a year of prolonged enemy fire on your positions where you kept feeding men into. The statement came after several Ukrainian media news outlets reported that the Ukrainian armed forces had withdrawn from the village, which now lies in ruins. Hey, it was in ruins 2 months ago, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, 5 months ago. Thank you for the super sticker, brother. I appreciate it. Guys, don't just donate super stickers. Ask questions. Say, what's up, brother? Hello from here and there. I want to read what you guys have to say. Don't just, I appreciate it. Go ahead and do super stickers if you want to do super stickers. But I want to talk to you guys. I want to communicate. That's what chats are for. Missing means they don't have to pay benefits, right? Yes, correct. That's what missing means. That's why they count most of their army as missing. Okay, so that article is just sort of pertaining to what we're talking about. But then in my other morning readings, I wake up at about 4 a.m. and start going through headlines and stuff. I come across this little interesting bit here from the Kiev Post. Ukraine says it's still fighting on Dnipro River left bank. So what is it? Are we fighting on the left bank or not? What I think that what this article goes on to say, basically, I'll just read it, whatever. Let's see. Ukraine says they're still fighting on Dnipro River on the left bank. Ukrainian military spokesman Dmitry said on state TV that Ukrainian forces are active on the left bank of the Dnipro, with the main positions in Krynky heavily damaged by enemy fire. So here is the exact same report, the exact same public statement made by the Ukrainian armed forces. But what does the Kiev Post do? The Kiev Post takes the little portion where they say, we still maintain a presence because we're sending guys over and they're drowning after their boats get hit by VOG grenades. But we still maintain some positions because we're hiding in a basement somewhere, or we're on an island or something. But this is how propaganda works, guys. You just take the parts of the information that you want and you repackage it and deliver it in a happy, nice little way that makes everybody feel very, 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 very happy. Now, if you go on to actually read the articles, unlike most human beings, you will find that there was probably going to be a massive omission somewhere in here. Ukraine said on Thursday its defensive positions around the village of Krynky on the left bank of the Dnieper River in the southern Kherson region had been destroyed, but that it was continuing operations there. Comments from the military spokesman came after the Ukrainian media reported that the army had quit a precarious bridgehead mission in the village, and that had drawn ire from Moscow. Ire? I don't know. All right, so very, 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 very interesting that you can get the two completely opposing moods in an article from a single statement. But this is how propaganda works, and you guys have to be very, 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 very careful about all propaganda, especially propaganda that confirms your bias. We all have biases. I have to be very, very, very careful when I hear information that confirms one of my biases. Say I make a prediction about the conflict, I have to make sure that information that I'm receiving, I'm not just assuming that it's correct because it confirms my bias. It's something that we have. Ire, yeah. All right. Got a couple more articles for you guys here. Guys, go ahead and get questions in now. Start getting questions in so I can answer those as we go along. I'm now looking at the chat more consistently. All right. This is a pretty big news story here. I just posted about this. You guys might have seen it. Germany plans to have military aid for Ukraine. That is not what Ukraine wants to hear when a Donald Trump, J.D. Vance White House could be around the corner. This is not good news. Germany is planning to nearly have military aid to Ukraine next year from around 8 billion, 8.7 billion US to around 4 billion euro, according to the draft budget approved by the government. Finance Minister Christian Lindner said that Ukraine's financing was secure for the foreseeable future due to a G7 group of rich nations scheme to raise 50 billion from interest on frozen Russian assets. Again, a horrible move that is going to have untold repercussions on the European banking system. But they're going to go through with it because they have no option. They're stuck holding the bag on Ukraine. I talked about it for a long time. I said that they were going to be stuck holding the bag, and that's exactly what is going on. Germany is Ukraine's second biggest military donor after the United States in 2024. Berlin's budget for Kiev is set at nearly 3.7 billion euros. The planned aid cut comes amid fears that Ukraine comes amid fears in Ukraine and amongst its European allies that U.S. funds could be slashed or even stopped if Donald Trump wins the presidency in November's election. Okay, so this is very, very big. Ukraine is already struggling. They're already struggling with the aid that they are receiving. They are requesting more aid constantly. And now you have the United States coming forward, Germany coming forward and saying that due to budgetary concerns, which we knew was coming because the German economy is in the toilet, we are not going to be able to fulfill the 7.5 billion, which we are currently fulfilling, that you are still losing with. Now you will receive half of that and you will lose twice as quick. That's what this is. There's no way to sugarcoat this at all. That's what this is. Okay. I'll look at some questions here. Let's see. Will Trump change anything? The way he's talking, he might, but you can't really listen to election politics and try to guess what is actually going to, election rhetoric and decide or understand what's actually going to become policy after the election. These things happen all the time. They make promises and then they never keep them. So who knows? The JD Vance pick is particularly interesting. I think that with the JD Vance pick, the sort of more isolationist America first policies are actually going to be pushed a lot harder than they were in Trump's first term. I think also Trump has learned a lot about Washington from his first term. And when he comes back, he's going to play the game a lot more smoothly and get more of what he wants to get done. We'll see how the Democrats try to stop him every step of the way, but who knows? Yeah, they account for the missing aid by stealing from Russia's frozen funds, which is not. I mean, you don't. Every country that now has money in Europe or in the United States is going to look at this and say, what happens when we become, you know, that people are concerned about humanitarian rights in our country, or what happens when we become the next Russia, when we become the next Iraq, when we become Afghanistan, when we become Libya, Syria, Venezuela? What happens when that's us? Our money is there. We can't leave our money in your bank, because if you decide that we're bad guys next, like you decided with Russia or China or any other axis of evil country, you know, why would we keep our money there? We're not going to do that. We're going to keep our money in China or Russia because they haven't had this, you know, pattern of freezing assets and stealing them, just outright stealing them. Yeah, it's just not a good look for especially a financial based economic system like the West has. You know, there's not a lot of resources. It's not industrialized. It's financial based services, and if you start negatively utilizing your only significant attribute, it's going to make you weaker just overall. So have the AFRF made advances in the northeast region of Ukraine yet? Are you talking about Sumy and Kharkov region? Because no. Are you talking about Kupiansk region? Slightly. They're making some slight advances. Go check out my map, guys. It's updated daily, so you can go check out where the Russian advances are. This guy just said Russia and Israel ? I don't know what that means. I don't think Russia and Israel. I've heard a lot of people say this, that they have like backdoor agreements and that Putin is some like Zionist lover, this, that, and the other. No, guys. And I've had people argue this because they don't engage Israeli strikes over Syrian territory. Guys, Syria is in a very precarious geopolitical position right now. It has been invaded by 3 separate Western-backed countries in Turkey, which is NATO, the United States, which occupies parts of Syria, and Israel, which occupies parts of the Golan Heights. The overall situation for Syria is unstable, to say the least. And they need as much stability as they can possibly maintain. They don't have any say about really what Iran does in Syria. Iran supports Bashar al-Assad, so there is that. They do move stuff through the country. Most of the Israeli strikes directly target Iranian-backed militias in the country. Sometimes Syrian troops die. But if Russia was to, say, engage an F-35 with air defense means, it would just start a wider war that would just destroy Syria. Guys, sometimes aggression and confrontation is not the way to achieve the geopolitical goals that a country has. Russia's goal right now is not to start a war between Syria and Israel in the Middle East that they're a part of because they couldn't let some Iranian-backed militia take a hit. It doesn't make any sense. I don't think that there's really this backdoor agreement between Israel and Russia. So, yeah. I was curious if any. Oh wait, this isn't a question for me. Curious if Kherson could be recaptured or if an operation would just turn into Krynky. So from the Russian side, it's actually quite difficult. I'll show you. We can talk about this a little bit. From the Russian side, considering the way that the high ground is positioned, this bank of the river, the reason why this side of the river, the Russian side, flooded when the dam broke, is because this side maintains the natural, just the high ground. So that's why the Krynky operation has been able to go on for as long as it did. It's just because the Krynky operation right here, the Russians don't enjoy a elevation advantage, and the Ukrainians do. So their artillery works much closer to the line of contact. Now, if the Russians begin operations over here, it probably will look like something like the Krynky operation to, start a bridgehead again on this side of the river. I don't really think that this is going to happen for a long time until the Ukrainian army is rather destroyed in this area. And specifically, I don't believe that the Russians are going to do this right now just because of the war in the East. Why would you put yourself in a poor position when you can just keep destroying the Ukrainian army over here, where you enjoy a shorter logistics line and everything? This is risky. I do believe that this will come eventually. Putin has made it very clear that this is going to be the outcome of the war. So I have no doubts that we will see some sort of operation eventually. But I do think that the Ukrainian army will be completely reduced before we see anything in this this area of the map. All right. Kalibrated. How full do you think Soviet era stocks of millet? I think that they're starting to get actually probably low. I think that at this time, I think that the Soviet stocks are becoming drained. I think that this is just a natural thing. We've seen 2.5 years of high intensity fighting. I think that the military industrial complex of Russia is now to the point where they are mitigating losses by their new production. So in terms of like the Russians running out of equipment, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But the Soviet stocks are getting depleted. I mean, they are not bottomless, and Russia has been using a lot of it. But that's what it was there for. If the Russians wouldn't have used it now, a lot of it would have just ended up rotting out. I mean, the timing was actually probably close to the end of most of the service life of the vehicles and stuff that it's being used. So good timing there for that Soviet stockpile. Use it or lose it sort of situation. Okay. Sorry, I'm just canceling out of some stuff. Kalibrated. What are your thoughts about the worries that some people in the pro-Russian space have about Putin cucking and playing his cards bad in the potential negotiations? I think all of that is gone. I think 2022, potentially 2023, this is a realistic idea. I don't think that this is a political viable option for Putin anymore. If Putin goes soft, I think you've already seen it. I think that Putin already came out and uncucked himself entirely, basically, by saying that the minimum required position for Russia to come to the negotiating table is the 4 oblasts, which is that's pretty substantial in and of that. Just to say that we demand that you leave our territory, which is these 4 oblasts, is pretty significant. That has some significance. It has some weight to it. On the other end, you have the military in an incredible place of strength right now. The Russian military is just getting stronger day by day. It's growing. It's becoming a powerhouse. The economy is established on the military success now. Why would you negotiate poorly from a position of strength? You wouldn't. In 2022, I would say Russia was almost negotiating from a place of parity. Not anymore. Not anymore. The only reason I wouldn't say they were negotiating from a place of parity is because they were willing to walk away from the table if the deal wasn't good enough for them, which they ended up doing. So did the Ukrainians. We have more evidence about the events in the city that cannot be mentioned. Watch the vid in the chat with translations. Am I missing something here? I might have missed something here. We have more evidences in the event in the city that cannot be mentioned. Watch the video in the chat with translations. Tag whatever video that is. I missed this. Sorry, but thank you for your donation. Send me a DM too if I don't end up getting to it. Calibrated anywhere in the northeast. Yeah, so in the Kupiansk region, they are advancing for sure. This question was about Russian advances in the north. Calibrated is assuming offensive possible. Anything is possible. I think it will look exactly like a Kharkov offensive, where you see a small cross-border incursion, which forces a Ukrainian rotation. We just had reports that the Russians may have tried some sort of probe across the Sumy region to try to enter, but so far no success there. But again, I don't know how realistic any of that is. I haven't seen any footage from that. Would Russia give weapons to Syria? Russia does give weapons to Syria. So yes, they absolutely would. Scott, you poor thing. Rob Lee is doing 100. His job is getting paid well. Innocent, endearing child. Question. According to Kiev's Institute own study, only 1% of UA support Palestine. A friend from Luhansk told me that the whole Donbass supports Palestine. Liberal students really don't know UA is pro-Zionist. Yeah, well, liberals don't, American liberals don't know anything about anything. They're pro-Hamas, so they're retarded. You can't try to rationalize libtard reasoning. Again, not really a Republican, but liberals are stupid as shit. Also, Republicans, did you see the MAGA at the Trump, the RNC thing with the stupid shit on their ear? Guys, that you look just as stupid as Democrats when they do stupid shit like wear masks way past when they're supposed to and shit like that. You're both in a cult. You're retarded. Sorry. My opinion. Have any thoughts on a possible uptick in partisan activity in the rear area of Ukraine? Good question, sir. Yes, I do, actually. And I will show you guys a video here on my Twitter, if I can find it, of Ukrainian TCC. Actually, I don't know if I can show it. I don't think I can actually show it because I will get demonetized. It will be in my demonetized episode, though, so go check that out. Free to watch on Patreon. Yes, there is a lot more partisan activity in Ukraine, especially in the Odessa region. We have seen continuous days and days and days of Ukrainian military enlistment officer vehicles being burned. Torched. So yeah, there is a significant uptick in Ukrainian partisan activity against the Ukrainian regime. For news from within RF, Moscow urban area in excellent English. Compliment to Calibrated. Calibrated is an excellent podcast. Awesome. Thank you, man. Somebody send me a DM of this guy too, and I will maybe try to get him on the podcast or something. Kharkov, Sumy, in the north. Oh, okay, so not so much Kupiansk area, I guess. Yeah, we could definitely see. We are seeing one. We saw one in Kharkov already. Are you meaning a larger offensive? Because again, I don't think you're going to see any large offensives until the Ukrainian army is completely destroyed. Like, no joke, until there is a Ukrainian army collapse, like a structural collapse, I don't think you're going to see any major Russian offensives. I see a lot of people making fun of the 1950s and 60s era military equipment, but is there still a use for those old equipment today? Yeah, so basically, if you look at the Ukraine war, what's come to pass is that volume is more important than the individual quality, because FPVs, say, just take tanks, for instance. There's really not much of a difference between a T-72 and a T-62 when it comes to its ability to survive an FPV. We've seen Abrams get taken out with a single FPV. We've seen T-90s get taken out with a single FPV. So if you can have more tanks on the battlefield than your opponent, doesn't matter what year it's from, if you have more shells going down range, if you have more resources to utilize, Yes, they're going to be beneficial. Does a T-62 have as good of armor as a T-90? Absolutely not. But if you have guys that know how to drive T-62s, I would rather be in a T-62 than walking or on a one of those golf carts getting transported here and there. I'd rather be in an IFV, whatever. You do what you have to do. I'd actually probably rather be on a motorcycle, to be honest. I think motorcycles are probably the most effective transportation in this war so far. If you can fly faster than the enemy can react with FPVs or artillery, you win. So I would rather drive in on a dirt bike and have some free agency to how I approach a assault than just driving, being planted on the top of some BMP or some, being in the back of some Bradley and just getting roasted in it would suck. Anything about partisan activity on either side? Just talked about that. A lot less Ukrainian partisan activity, though. A lot less rail lines getting, sabotaged. A lot less Ukrainian partisan activity. I think what happened was Ukraine had a pretty large network and had a expanding network for some time of Russians or Ukrainians living in Russia that were dissatisfied with the regime or whatever and were willing to do this partisan activity. I think a lot of those resources have been used up and found out, weeded out. There's only so many partisans you have in a country, and once they've all been uprooted, the networks kind of collapse and the effectiveness drops completely. So we have seen a lot less Ukrainian partisan activity behind Russian lines. It's just what happens when you have intelligence services, though. They clean things up. Ukraine is becoming less censored and less controlled as the amount of men that are needed for the military service are pulled away from policing the actual countryside. Any thoughts on when Biden will drop out or step down? Yep, I'm just about to talk about that. People said on Cars on Fire, big no-no on YouTube, but you can shave for everyone to watch. It's true. That is true. I can't show a car burning where nobody died, but yeah. How about the partisan movement on the Russian-controlled territories? Just talked about that. God, I'm so fast, guys. How about quads? Are you mean like ATVs? Yeah, that would be sick. My mic is not unplugged. Don't be doing that. Don't be doing that. All right. Yeah, I'll talk about the JD Vance stuff now. Okay, so JD Vance was just picked up as Trump's vice president. This is it was an expected pick, I think, but I think it's a much better pick than, say, like the Vice Pence pick. I don't think Vice Pence was a good vice president. I don't think it was a good choice for Trump at the time. But Trump has picked JD Vance, and JD Vance is very America first in his policy decisions. We will see if that continues. I don't have any faith in politicians. If Trump continued or even increased support for the war in Ukraine, I would not be surprised in the slightest. But I think that Trump has a constituency that he is now very, very, very much going to play to. Obviously, he already had it before, but now with the whole assassination thing, he literally has an army behind him now. And I think that he's actually really going to affect some change, at least in terms of Ukraine. I think Israel is going to probably stay almost the exact same. But when it comes to Ukraine, I think Ukraine is a option now for the U.S. And I think a lot of people are looking at that option and saying, why are we giving money to Ukraine? They're not even winning. If they were winning, maybe it would make sense. But they're not winning, and they're corrupt, and all they do is whine and complain about us not doing enough. So I do think you're going to see at least a minor policy shift in the United States, just like we're seeing in Germany, less aid, sort of cooling the rhetoric, getting it out of the news. And then eventually when Ukraine decides to surrender, they'll make a claim that Russia has been completely attrited and that they won't be able to attack Europe, even though they have no plans to attack Europe. It's just a narrative. You set yourself up and you give yourself contingencies to escape that narrative, with stuff like X amount of Russians have died, X amount of equipment's been destroyed. It's just what we do. But Biden is now quote unquote sick with COVID. A large majority of the Democratic establishment is now asking him to be removed. It's going to be very interesting. So this person asks, if Biden drops out and Harris becomes the Democratic choice, what happens to the VP job? They'll just have to select a new VP. I mean, as they're, I don't know. The VP is going to become the next in line under Kamala. I think it's this. Is it the Secretary of State becomes the vice president, or the Secretary of Defense becomes the vice president? I'm not sure which one moves up, but whoever's in next in line, I think it's the Secretary of State becomes the vice president. Somebody's going to correct me, which is fine. That person will do the job until the election, but I think that they'll probably choose somebody else for the Speaker of the House. There we go. The Speaker of the House becomes the president. Not Secretary of State, Speaker of the House. I learned all of these things in school, guys, but it's so unimportant and so irrelevant that you just forget. Yeah. So whoever takes over probably won't be Kamala's running partner if Kamala ends up running. But it does really seem like Biden is being forced out now. It seems like there is a rift in the Democratic Party where you have the Biden administration where they want him to run, obviously his supporters, but you have the rest of the Democratic convention that is now coming out and saying Biden needs to just drop out. He's not going to win if he runs. The reason why they wanted him to run was because they thought that he was the best option with the highest probability chance of winning. He's sort of a house name. Democrats know him. It's his second term, so he's just going to kind of roll over. It'll be really easy. That's what the thought was. I really don't think that this was planned, that they were planning to do this. They look like they're kind of in a really shitty position where they're not actually going to replace him. See, I thought that they might try to do something sneaky where they replace him with somebody who's going to win the election. But now it just looks like they just don't have any options. And they're like, well, Kamala, maybe, I guess, maybe is what they're going with. That's not going to play out very well. It looks like Trump is definitely going to win the election. And I think the Democrats should really just start preparing for Trump to win the election and go about it that way. But they won't, because they still think that they can win. We'll see if they try to undemocratically suggest a Democratic candidate. But Kamala is not going to win. Kamala is an absolute train wreck. It's going to be horrible. So expect Biden to drop out, I think, probably by this weekend. It sounds like a lot of the Democratic sources are saying that he's going to drop out by this weekend. Axios came out and made that suggestion. So very, very, very real possibility that we will have a different president by this time next week, guys. And that'll just be good content for me. I'm going to probably turn into just a, what are those pages, the YouTube channels that are just like, it's like all reactions and all like political drama. What do you call that? It's the, what do you call the political drama pages that only talk about like the most topical shit, and they always act like they're experts on everything, and it's always like abortion and trans rights and stuff like that. Oh yeah, here it is. Oh, I just spilled some water. Sorry guys, hold on. I have a towel here. I spilled water. Okay. Yeah, here's what it is. This is what we call it. Trash. Thank you. My feed. Opinion on the Trump shooting with obvious negligence verging on outright allowance. Yeah, that's where I'm at. I can't tell if they allowed it to happen because it was like 26 minutes of incompetence that led up to this shot that nicked Trump. It's a complete shit show. I don't know what to even say about it. I think really I want to believe in my heart of hearts that somewhere there was some conspirator uh, plot that was put together to kill Trump. But honestly, honestly, what it probably is going to end up being is that this kid was just a fucking loser, and he decided that this is what he was going to do to make his mark on the world. He wanted to be or he wanted to be the guy, like the guy who killed Duke Ferdinand, but instead just got memed for missing a shot at 150 yards, which is peak for this time in history we live in, where somebody tries to assassinate your president and you just make fun of him endlessly. Um, it looks like a conspiracy. It looks like a conspiracy to at least let the shots get off. Secret Service completely failed. There should have been a sniper on that building. The building should have been at least secured from the ground completely and totally. There's no way somebody should be able to walk up with a ladder, climb onto a roof, get a shot off like that. It's ridiculous. If not the utmost of incompetence, it leans towards some sort of allowance. But honestly, what I honestly think it's going to end up being is just complete negligence. And again, it's like this idea of Western military superiority. We have this idea that Secret Service is this amazing, fantastic security service that protects the president outright and does its job completely and totally, which is kind of true. But I think that most of the Secret Service work doesn't actually come from guarding him on the ground. I think a lot of the intelligence gathering is the important part, preventing the assassination attempts before they happen, finding these people, or preventing the ability for them to get into position to attempt an assassination, obviously. And I think what you're seeing is just the reality. It's just the reality. There's only so much these security services can do. They are humans. They make huge amounts of mistakes, and they're lazy. This is the former presidential candidate. The former president who's now a candidate, Secret Service. So you could tell they have women and stuff in there. The Trump Secret Service that was at the UFC fight. Now that was the Secret Service that Trump needed at the rally, but he didn't get that, right? He got the backup Secret Service. And they all did their jobs fine. I'm sure it was just a breakdown of communications and stuff. Like I said, I want it to be some BlackRock conspiracy. That would be fantastic because it would confirm a lot of my biases and stuff like that about the deep state and the direction that the country is going. But realistically, it could have just been a Secret Service fuck up. And that's so much worse for so many different reasons. Yep, slope roof. That was their excuse. The roof was sloped, which is the White House is sloped and they have snipers up there, so it doesn't make any sense. It's just stupid as shit. All right, guys. That's where I'm going to wrap things up for today. I really appreciate you guys watching me. We made it to an hour and 8 minutes. Holy cow. That's a good live stream. I will likely be on tomorrow if there is enough news to talk about. Please like and subscribe to the video, guys. Share it with people if you think people are dumb enough to listen to me. I would really appreciate it. Your support is what makes this work of mine possible. And yeah, thank you guys so much. Be safe, take care, and enjoy the rest of your week.